Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Boyle and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the people who make this possible for you every single day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So we're going to talk about the politics of the Phantom Menace today. And I'm kind of surprised to discover for myself that this may actually be the most political of the 6 movies that George Lucas created. Now, where this started for me, of all places, is this guy, Karl von Clausewitz, who was a Prussian general back in the 1800s. He has a quote attributed to him, which is, surprise, surprise, a misquote. You probably have heard the phrase, war is politics by other means. Well, that's not actually what he said. He said that war is a continuation of policy with other means, and yet, that was actually also a statement, part of a larger thesis that he had, where that's actually just one way to look at war. It's not necessarily the total way of looking at war, but, one aspect of it. And the entirety of the Phantom Menace, you could well argue, is an exercise in politics in its various forms. For a start, at the opening crawl, we are told that the taxation of trade routes is in dispute, and the Trade Federation decides to be a little more aggressive in pursuing the situation by instituting the blockade of Naboo. And when you look at earlier drafts of the Phantom Menace script, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, there's a great concern on the Trade Federation's part with the optics of what they're doing and the machinations, how they are pitching and framing what they're doing. In the earlier drafts, they're claiming that there is a liberation group on Naboo that is unhappy with Queen Amidala's leadership and that they want Queen Amidala to accept a treaty and to do business differently with the Trade Federation. Amidala calls the Trade Federation on this and says it's nonsense and that it's really only a pretext for the invasion that they already had planned. The Trade Federation is saying that they're just responding to the Liberation Group's request by offering troops and whatnot. And Queen Amidala obviously sees right through that, and in the actual movie, in the final version of things, we don't hear anything about a liberation group or anything like that. The Trade Federation is just moving. That being said, Newt Gunray and company are having conversations with Darth Sidious talking about the invasion and whether it would be legal, how it would be seen by the Republic. And of course, Sidious is like, I will make it legal, right? And then later tells the Trade Federation folks that he has the Senate bogged down in procedures, right? So yeah, a lot of political action happening here. And the initial solution to the problem, according to what Queen Amidala and the rest of her crew decide, is to plead the case to the Senate on Coruscant. And so that is what the Jedi are going to help Amidala do. But of course, when she finally gets to Coruscant, she has a very disappointing meeting with Senator Palpatine, who tells her just how badly things are going in the Senate and in the Republic, that it's in the control of the bureaucrats, and that Valorum has no real power, and that ultimately this whole business is going to get referred to the courts, which Amidala says, the courts take even longer. And yeah, it's not a good situation at all. It's at that point early on in those private discussions that Palpatine says our best chance to do this is to vote no confidence on Valorum and hopefully get a new chancellor, a stronger chancellor in place who can force the Trade Federation's hand and get them off of Naboo. So again, this is all about political maneuvering. Amidala doesn't want to do that, says Valorum's been their biggest supporter, but yeah, there's no help for it. So Amidala does what she intended to do, which is go to the Senate, try to tell everyone what's going on there and get some action done. Of course, the Trade Federation will fight against that. The folks from Malastare back up the Trade Federation, and so ultimately, what happens in the early version of the script is that the matter is sent to committee, so it goes to die in committee. And in the actual movie, of course, there's a recommendation for a commission to be created and sent to Naboo to investigate the veracity of Queen Amidala's claim. Now, it does seem like Valorum might be on Amidala's side and want to help her immediately. But then, as Palpatine whispers into her ear, the bureaucrats step in, the ones with true power in the Senate and in the Republic, and that they're also This is the capper on the payroll of the Trade Federation. And once that little line has been delivered, yeah, I mean, Palpatine manipulates this so perfectly. I mean, you gotta admit that he did a fantastic job for what he was trying to do. Valorum, of course, says, yeah, sorry, we have to do a commission, defer your motion to get the Trade Federation out, wait for a commission, and this is where Amidala says, okay, I guess Palpatine's right. I won't defer, and instead, I want a no confidence vote in you. Now, it's pretty hysterical that Palpatine, of course, then says, hey, I'm on the short list for new Chancellor things. It's a surprise, to be sure. Of course, it's not a surprise at all, but he also doesn't expect Amidala to decide, well, yeah, I'm going back to Naboo and I'm going to handle this myself, right? So, that in itself is kind of interesting that Palpatine was going to deal with this politically only. And we never do find out what his endgame would have been on this had Padme not actually gone to Naboo to fight the Federation's invasion herself. But I suppose you can imagine a situation where he might want to accelerate what is happening behind the scenes with the clone production on Kamino, because then the Kaminoans could fight the Trade Federation and their army and whatnot. Behind the scenes, Darth Sidious could continue to manipulate the Trade Federation into becoming an even more dangerous power in the galaxy. But as we know, Amidala goes back to Naboo. They are able to successfully defeat the Trade Federation. And then that last line of Panaka's, which is supposed to be the zinger, like, you can kiss your trade commission goodbye. Excuse me, franchise is actually the word I'm looking for. You can kiss your trade franchise goodbye. So ultimately, Amidala deals a couple of different defeats to the Trade Federation. You can say an outright war defeat, right, from the physical aspect of things, but also a political defeat in terms of losing their franchise. And then as a result, I think Palpatine's plans are set back by a number of years. And again, circling back to Padme's decision to go to Naboo and fight the Trade Federation, the justification that she gives to Palpatine for it is that it is clear that the Republic no longer functions, and she hopes that Palpatine is able to bring some sanity to the Senate and its proceedings, but she says, yeah, like, politics is not going to work. This political institution is not working, and so it's going to have to be politics by other means, to misquote the phrase that we started this whole conversation with. So yeah, ultimately, The Phantom Menace, I think, is entirely a political movie and driven by political machinations, and that's, I guess, my take on it. I'd love to hear what your take is on it, whether you think the movie is especially or overtly political, or if you think, nah, it's not really so much. So if you catch this on YouTube, comments are right there. Spotify Q&A is there. Anywhere else, please head to the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com and let me know what you think. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please help me get it out to more people who might enjoy this dose of Star Wars joy. You can do that by teaching algorithms through ratings and reviews and likes and subscribes and follows and joins and comments and all that fun stuff. You can just tell other people you know that like Star Wars and like podcasts that they might like this one too. And you can even help me as an independent creator producing this dose of Star Wars joy, and you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7x7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, as always. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.